Okay, right. Laura, welcome to the Consigning Sales Transformation Podcast.
Thank you
Um,
very much, Phil.
we got you here finally.
Yes, yes, finally. And I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Okay, well, it's an absolute pleasure. And I know that we've been trying to get you on the Sales Transformation Podcast series for some months now. And I think it started when you were at Vodafone. And I think we'd noticed you'd won a prestigious award for the work you'd been doing with a sales transformation initiative. And we thought we must have you on the series to come and talk to us more about you and your experiences and so on.
Very
Um, so actually, before we talk about that, I wonder if we could, for the benefit of our listeners, just share a little bit more information about who you are and what your background has been in sales and how you've ended up in sales enablement.
Of course, of course. My background, as you can hear from my accent, I'm not native English.
Well, you do
I'm
speak English incredibly well, Laura, I have to
Thank you.
say. So,
Thank you.
congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. And I'm Italian,
Yeah.
and that's where I lived the majority of my life. I moved to London about 10 years ago now. And I have a big family. We're an inclusive family of six, two daughters, two sons, and a husband. And the family is half Italian, half English, British, and a dog and a cat. So really inclusive. And we do as a in my career reflects a lot of my passions. I
Mhm.
like traveling. I like relationships, and especially like building relationship all around the world. And that's why I graduated in foreign languages. I've graduated in French and English. And the reality is that I wanted to become a teacher. And the reason why I wanted to become a teacher was that my mom was a teacher. And she was doing her job with a big passion. And she was always thrilled when her students were successful and when they did a good job, that I was so excited. And I said, okay, it must be the best job in the world. And when I finished my studies and I graduated, and during my studies, I was traveling a lot to learn languages, so France, Germany, UK. What I really liked were all the connection that I was able to build, and the ability to use the language to connect and
Mhm.
communicate. When I finished my studies, so I wanted to become a teacher, but the first job was in sales. And so I can say that I was in sales by chance.
Okay.
Um, and the biggest driver was the fact that I was a very researched asset at the time because I could speak multiple languages. And
Mhm.
as you can imagine, 20 years ago in Italy, there were not many people speaking multiple languages. And so I was called into an organization that had international branches. And that's how I joined the world of sales. And I've been passionate about sales ever since. But I would say my longest career, and where I really grew as a salesperson, had been when I joined Expedia a
Mhm.
few years ago. And on top of the job of a salesperson, what I really liked at Expedia was the transformation. So it's back in 2004. The
Mhm.
majority of the people were going to travel agencies in order to travel. And so the challenge that I had at the time when I joined Expedia, was to educate people, but especially like hoteliers, to distribute the rooms in a different way, and to help them see what will happen in the future, and thinking about what will happen in the future. People will travel differently. They will start booking their travel online, and they will start, exploring many more destinations that what we are exploring today. So the purpose, what was driving me, which was to really help people, travel differently
Mhm.
and embrace a new way of traveling and exploring the world. And that time, so selling was a lot about educating, about transforming the way hoteliers were distributing their rooms, and new functions were born because of that transformation. There was revenue management. The prices of the hotels were becoming like public to everyone. And there was a new way for hoteliers to distributing themselves because they were immediately in prime time. So posting photos of their hotels, interacting directly with customers, and for customers all around the globe.
Mm.
And so I really enjoyed the challenge of helping the all the hotels I was in contact with to transform.
So, was this working in the UK or was it working in Italy at the time?
At the time, I was working in Italy.
In Italy.
So yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And that's great. So a little bit you found yourself following your mother's footsteps in terms of education, but with a sales angle. I mean,
Yeah.
the two are very closely connected, aren't they? Sort of education and sales. So that's so interesting to hear.
I
So
didn't
you
do that connection immediately though.
say,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah. Initially, it seemed, oh wow, I'm doing something that is completely different, but actually, it was not.
Yeah, and I think this notion of transformation that you mentioned as well, from the example you've just given, I could see that that's a massive, change that was taking place within the travel sector with organizations like Expedia coming into it. Wow, how amazing. That's great. Okay, so you started off in Expedia. What happened after that?
After that, so when I started at Expedia, I started first as individual contributor, and I was the only one traveling all around Italy and contracting hotels for them to be distributed through the website. Fantastic job. I was traveling, I was seeing new destinations, and
Yeah.
I was interacting with many of these people. And then I moved up in my career, and I started leading the sales team for Italy. And then after 4 or 5 years of doing that, I thought, I know quite a lot about the supply side. I want to know how do we drive demand to that supply,
Okay.
and how the e-commerce works. And so I left sales for about 3 or 4 years and had different experiences. I had 2 years of experience in e-commerce. And that was a very interesting experience because I learned how difficult it is to drive demand to
Mhm.
once you have the supply, but also how it can be rewarding when you succeed in that. And then I moved into sales operations before having one day, Ariane Goran, who was president of the Expedia business, reached out to me and she said, Laura, there is a new opportunity here. It was back in 2016. And she said, would you like to start building a sales enablement function for Expedia? And I was thrilled by that opportunity because it was again another big transformation, and it was about using what I was what I was really enjoying to do, but at a much bigger scale. So, what made me successful in sales and when I was leading a sales organization was really helping people grow,
Mm.
and also I was very curious about how could I simplify internal processes for sales. How could I help the team be successful and faster? And so you have all of this in sales enablement. And
Mhm.
even if I didn't know anything about sales enablement like 10 years ago, I went out and I decided to really understand what does sales enablement entail, and what am I supposed to do, and how can I help, the global team to really become successful.
Mhm.
And the fact of having sales experience, but also have walked in the shoes of different functions, was super important for me, especially when you are in a function of sales enablement that interacts
Yeah,
with
yeah.
everybody in the organization.
Yeah. No. I think that's a critical. It's critical you have that sort of sales experience, like you've just said. So people just look at sales enablement or have different definitions of it. I think some people see it as more to do with data and operational data. Other people see it more as training and education. So, do you mind giving me what your definition is of sales enablement?
It's it's really the perfect interconnection of humanity and technology, and it's about making our sales team more successful in what they do by equipping, training, coaching, and providing them with the analytics that help them becoming better and better at what they do. So it's a really good interaction between the two, and it's a lot about helping sellers with the how they can achieve their objectives. I like one of my first mentors in enablement, who is actually my current boss, was using an analogy about using usually, a seller is given a destination that they need to achieve. And they say, okay, you need to climb Mount Everest in the next 3 months.
Hmm.
And what sales enablement does is to equip with everything they need to climb successfully. But they are with the person who climbs all the way, all along the way, so that we can remove every single obstacle that they can find in the path, and that they can reach the summit successfully.
That's a great definition. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think we're going to explore this topic in a bit more detail later on. But so you talked about your move within Expedia into sales enablement, and that's given you a chance to explore this new area in some detail. So, what happened after that? How did your career develop after Expedia?
So after Expedia, I joined a startup and Deliveroo, and then and where I had as a mission to build a sales enablement function, and I was helping the sales team to be really successful with restaurants. So it was food tech. So from
Okay.
travel to food tech, and it was really an interesting step, because it was a lot about the velocity of getting the deals and getting people ramped up very quickly, and productive really, really, really quickly. So what do the sales team need to do in order to be able to go out to market and contract more restaurants? And then the last step was with Vodafone, where I rebooted the sales enablement function for Vodafone Business, and that's where our story started, because we
Okay.
won the award for the best digital transformation in 2022.
That's fantastic. That's great. So, tell us what your perspectives are of sales enablement now and how it's evolved, and what you think some of the big challenges are for sales enablement.
So from 2016 to now, there has been a big evolution of sales enablement. Back in 2016, so one way I've always used to do in order to get up to speed and really be successful in what I do is learning from what the best do. And
Mhm.
so I'm reading books or participating to events. And I remember the first event in 2016, we were 20 people in the room discussing sales enablement. And I wanted to learn it all from the best practitioners. And at the time, there was a lot of building. So it was a completely new function in Europe. And that at that time, it was all around content curation. It was all around onboarding programs and how sales enablement could simplify the life of a salesperson. And what happened next with with the pandemic first hitting, and then with the economic downturn, the function, the enablement function has very much and very quickly transformed. And it has become more of a strategic function in helping businesses to really turn the strategy into consistent execution. And what I've seen happening is one, consolidating, and the function has proven its value when it comes to breaking silo within the company and making sure that all the functions start working collaboratively together to
Mhm.
reach objectives, or the impact that it has on making sure that the salespeople are confident and more productive and achieve higher win rates. Now, we have just released one of the latest report on sales enablement, and we have interviewed 400 practitioners in sales enablement all around the world, from the US to the UK to Germany, France. And what has come up is that 80% of the companies have now a sales enablement function. And those companies who have a sales enablement function have seen an increase of 7 percentage points in win rate. So it means that enablement is really starting to get its seat at the table when it comes
Mhm.
to transforming the way sellers sell and when it comes to seller productivity. So especially in a world where especially in this, if we think about this economic downturn and what are the side effects? So the uncertainty within the business and the fact that the buyer have really changed the way they buy.
Mhm.
On one side, they are much more like product savvy. They go and they do a lot of researches before even talking with a seller, and also there are many more stakeholders involved in the sales process when it comes to take the final decision about buying a certain product or about buying a certain solution. So selling has become even much more harder than it was before. And companies also, the competition has become harder. And so companies are pushed into delivering new products and new solutions at a much, much faster pace. And the seller need to make sure that they constantly stay current with all the new products, all the new solutions, all the new competitors coming into the market. And so what happens is also that the marketing team starts producing even more content. And so more content, more product to take to the market, more competitors coming into the scene. You can believe, if you've been a seller, as I have
Sure.
been, you can feel like all the pressure that is within sales. And so a function like sales enablement that simplifies and streamlines and makes sure that the sales team can really focus on the main priorities has become like a key function that company
Mhm.
needs, especially in this economic downturn.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we would sort of totally agree with with what you've just said. And it's been interesting for me to watch sales over, quite a number of years now, sort of evolve and develop. And I think it's been relatively, if you look at systems to help salespeople sell, it's been in the context of history relatively recent that systems like CRM, let's just take CRM and as an overarching system have evolved. If you compare it to manufacturing systems or finance, which have been around for centuries longer than in sales, we've had it reasonably late. But we speak to so many organizations who are frustrated, I think, with the systems that they have that support, the sellers to sell. And a lot of CRM systems, and I'd be interested to have your point of view on it, are sort of almost designed for the benefit of the management team and not so much for the benefit of the seller. And I can see you smiling there, so I don't know whether that means you agree with me or not. But what I'm sensing from what you're saying is that a lot of what you believe is the future is around putting the seller at the center of the system rather than necessarily management at the center of the system, if you know what I mean.
Correct. And it's absolutely so. I remember when I was in sales and a new CRM was introduced. And as a salesperson, sometimes you feel like you are under the eye of a big brother who wants to
Hmm.
know everything you do. And so I always look at the other side of the coin and say, okay, how can I use this to help me better plan, better forecast, and or to identify where other sellers are doing better? Why John is going faster than me?
Hmm.
Especially when I was a sales leader, what I was hungry of, if I wanted to grow my team, it was to really understand what are the best practices, who is creating the maximum engagement with the customers, and what are they doing in order to achieve that.
Hmm.
Um, I agree with you that CRMs help sellers navigate in the what. What are the actions? So, for example, how many prospects I'm contacting, and thinking about what are the actions that are happening in the sales cycle. What is lacking? What was lacking in the past was the how.
Hmm.
So how do I move, for example, from a certain stage of the sales cycle to another? How do I contact, or how do I interact with my customers in a way that deliver value to them? So the main question, after we have responded to the what, and I agree with you that it's really perceived as a more of a management system than a system that helps to drive productivity. Um, it's thinking about how can we guide seller, how can we provide them with the right information and the I would say the right preparation to go and actively have relevant conversation with customers. And this is what sales enablement systems and platforms do. And when you have a combination of a CRM and a sales enablement platform,
Hmm.
that's where the CRM and that's the combination that
Yeah.
helps with driving productivity.
So I'm interested to talk to you about your views on management and enablement. And we see often two schools of sales management practice. One school is the best way to motivate and get the most out of your sales force is to only focus on sales performance, sales results, to almost have a culture of fear, that if you don't hit your quarterly targets often enough, your job is at kind of jeopardy. And they really believe in that. They believe that the best way to get the most out of people is through what we call a sort of management by fear type culture. And there's another school of managers, and I think you would absolutely fit into this. That is very much about coaching, and it's very much about using information to help, like you've just said, help people to become more productive. Our view is that probably 90% of organizations, sales managers out there, are probably sitting more in the management by fear seat, for whom these concepts of enablement are going to be slightly um, sort of bizarre. It's a nice to have, but actually, I think the way I've done things, target driven, sales result driven, not really interested in leading indicators, much more interested in the lagging indicators. Now, that's how we see it at the moment. Now, maybe I'm being a bit provocative in this, but I'm just, perhaps I'm doing it just to, have a debate about it. But
Yeah.
I'm interested to know what your views are about management, because unless senior management really buy into sales enablement, it's going to be really difficult to bring all of these support functions together.
Yeah, and what you've just described is one of the challenges that we have as in sales enablement, which is a good challenge to have, because if we manage to transform that, we will manage to transform the way the sellers sell. And so I have experienced what you are describing. So managing by fear and being very, very results driven. And usually this is also driven by a culture of urgency where everything is urgent. And so you have less time for thinking and more time, and it's all about doing. And one way that where sales enablement can make an impact, but it's I would say 50% of impact in this type of culture, and where you can have a CRO or a VP of sales with that mentality to listen to you, is by providing some quick wins, which are not on productivity but on efficiency. So what they care about, and because they are looking at lagging indicator, they're looking also at how much time my sales team is spending with customers, and how can I reduce all the admin stuff. And so this is something that enablement can solve, but it's like a quick win and in the short term. So what I can see is, for example, in companies I've been working as sales enablement practitioners, sales team were spending about 8 to 10 hours every week just to look for content and stay current, or make sure that they were prepared for their meetings with customers. And so one of the programs that I had was, let's reduce it by 50%. And then once I get to 50%, another 50%. So it means that I was giving my sales team 4 hours back every week, which is 20 hours back every month. It's a lot of time. And this, improves for sure the efficiency, because you have more time of sellers with the customers. What is really difficult in that culture is to think about, now that I've given you time back, how can we help seller in using that time more efficiently? And that's where you need to have more of a growth mentality, where you can use some of that time to help seller to upskill themselves, and some of that time to be more customer facing. But the part of making sure that there is this accountability to learn and to continuously improve the way you do things come from more of a growth mentality, not a fear mentality, because you need to assign part of that time that you're giving back to the sales team to be able to absorb and really grow in their profession.
Yeah. I love the culture of urgency. I think that's so true that you've kind of alluded to as well. And also interesting comment you make about how do you, having sort of made freely available this extra time, it's how do you fill that time with with productive ideas. But you're saying that the biggest challenge is, in your view, how to get people to readjust what they do. So are you saying by that um, the growth mindset that you've alluded to is something that you think is lacking, or is it just a void that people are not too sure how to use their time? Or do you feel organizations or individuals perhaps haven't really understood the concept of a growth mindset?
Um, that's I think that some companies buy into the idea, but then it's the execution that is lacking. Because everyone, if you talk conceptually about the growth mindset, they would say, "Oh yes, that's what we want to have." But actually, when they act and they execute more in the urgency mode.
Mm.
And so one of the biggest impact that sales enablement can do is to help
Mhm.
really transform. It's this change management that needs to happen. It's the way you execute. It's the
Yeah.
way you start with a new culture, and how this new culture then plays across the organization.
So if you were taking on if an organization invited you to come in and help them, with their sales, where do you start? What do what would be your starting point? If you were to come into Consalia and help us transform our sales productivity, what would you do with us?
That's really interesting question, and that's my job actually.
Okay,
That's what I do.
right.
Uh,
Okay, so tell us more about your job then.
as so What I do is I work hand in hand with companies to make sure that we work together to achieve the transformation that they want to achieve. And we've just launched as Highspot a new sales enablement methodology that is called the
Mhm.
strategic enablement framework.
Okay.
And I'm very graphic in my way of seeing things.
You're
So
being very Italian there with your hands.
hands. So let's say that the first thing that you need to understand is where the company wants to go. So our Everest, the top of
Yeah.
the Everest, and this can be pretty straightforward. Something that sometimes is missing in company is really understanding where you're starting from,
Mhm.
and assessing where you are. So, am I trained enough? Do I have the right equipment? Do I have the right coach to go up to the top? Do I have the right strategy? And do I have the right plan in place to get to the top? And so it's really important that together with your strategic initiatives and the outcome that you want to achieve, you understand what's your starting point and what could be the potential blockers
Mhm.
that I need to remove to make sure that this happens. I will give you an example of a
Mhm.
company I was working with. And the strategic initiative was they launched a new product, and the outcome that they wanted to achieve was more revenue. And when we started analyzing, and in the middle between the two, who is the key piece of the execution are sellers. So it's the sales team who are the
Mhm.
ones who need to execute on that strategy. And one of the biggest blocker of that sales team was the fact that the majority of their customers were very digitally savvy, but the sales team wasn't. And so, how can I make sure that my sales team has the right skills and capabilities in order to be where my customers are? And so
Mhm.
you start thinking about, what are the programs that I need to put in place so that I equip my sellers to go to market in the channels and becoming really expert of the channels that help me achieving those customers. As you know, changing human behavior is super difficult.
Sure.
And what we usually do as humans when we are in an emergency or an urgency, we go back to the initial behaviors. We kind of forget everything we have learned in a 1-hour training, and we go back to what we were used to do. And so this model works in once I equip my sales team with what they need to know in order to go to market, it's really important I train them, and in a safe environment where they can practice. So I practice with you, Phil, my pitch before pitching it directly to my customer, so that, I when I pitch the customer, I'm really confident that I am driving the right message. And the third pillar that is really important of this methodology, and what really helps us in embedding a new behavior, is about coaching. Is having somebody who is looking at how you're pitching to a customer and helps you improving the way you engage with the customers on the go. This is the human aspect. You remember that at the beginning we were talking about the technology.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
If you have the right technology in place, what the technology gives you is a lot of data about, for example, so I have this salesperson who has gone through the documents, has gone through the training, has started pitching, this product to my customer. And actually, what I'm seeing is that they have 50% open rate. And so as a sales leader, what I can do is understanding, thanks to the technology, what is working well and what is not. And this is really powerful because what you can do is to course correct on the go. Is to understand what is working well that I need to do more, and potentially use this and expand and educate other sellers in the same team with those best practices. And what is it exactly that I need to stop doing? Because also identify what I need to stop doing is equally important as identify what do I need to do more of. And having access to this data helps you, one, coach on the go, reinforce the right behaviors with your sales team while they're working. And so it's not a one-off, but it happens week 1, week 2, month 1, month 2, until it becomes part of your DNA. And you start using the same approach more and more. And then you to introduce something new. So methodology is really equipping, training, coaching, and analyzing and reinforcing the right behavior in your sales team. And that's how sales enablement can really help, embedding new behavior, making sales people more agile in what they need to do, and help them achieve their objectives.
And how easy is it to, because I think part of this relies on analyzing the conversations that go on between a salesperson and a customer. Is that correct? Not just whether you won or lost something. So how is that sort of information captured in a way that doesn't require salespeople to spend too much time kind of reviewing what might come out of sales calls? How's that part of it done?
So if the customer allows you to, you can record that call.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you can identify.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's really powerful.
Yeah. Yes, it's very interesting, the whole sort of area of sort of analytics and conversational analytics, and even down to words and phrases that are sometimes used that have a positive or negative impact. But perhaps more easy to do it if you're in a sort of digital sales environment where you're on the phone or using Zoom, where it's. But in a face-to-face selling environment, perhaps more difficult to say, "Do you mind if I record our conversation?"
Yeah.
So I
Correct.
guess it depends on the situation that we're in. So it's a combination of data, which that you'll be looking at the data systems they have, and you'll be looking at how do we make sure we get the right development content in front of the salespeople so that they are sort of learning. This is your growth mindset I think learning about the products, and that's how you would start to bring together data enablement training into helping salespeople
Yeah,
become
yeah,
more productive. It's
yeah.
very, very
Especially as
interesting.
for example, I was seeing that a lot in companies where when I introduced this methodology, a lot of the sales leaders, especially sales manager level, they were sales managers for the first time, and
Yeah.
they didn't know how to coach their
Mhm.
teams. And so one way that was really effective to coach them to become really good coach was to start from some data. And because the data themselves don't tell you a lot. It's when you look at the data and then you start talking with your team and say, okay, I see this number. Why is this happening?
Mhm.
That's when you create a very good relationship with the team that you're leading. That's when you get insights. And then that's when you start asking the right questions that help them finding the right answers.
Mhm.
Um, and so to go back to your question, how do you help companies, to really transform and turn the strategy into execution? There's a lot around this methodology that we can help putting in place, and that really helps driving the sales behavior that you want to drive to execute
Mhm.
the strategy. But of course, it depends on case by case basis and on the priorities of the company.
Yeah.
So we always have these two starting point. Where do you want to go? And start thinking about where you are. What are the challenges in between? And how can we remove all those barriers?
Mm. Yeah, that's so interesting. Um, what would you say is more important out of mindset versus sort of knowledge and skills in terms of achieving sales performance? Where you know, what would you prioritize out of those two?
I think you know my answer. Mindset.
You would say it would be mindset, and this comes back to your growth mindset kind of perspective as well. No, of course we would. Yeah, we
When
would.
you have the right mindset, you can then acquire skills
Yeah,
and
yeah,
abilities.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely. So we've learned a little bit now about what you're doing at Highspot, I think, in terms of the new sort of career that you now have developed. And I've looked at this report that is on the website, which is in some ways it's really insightful. In some ways it's rather frightening, isn't it? With some of the data that you're getting out of it in terms of the way sales and marketing interact, and some of the what you've talked about it already, some of the lack of training and support that's provided. So no, I found it really interesting to see some of the data. And I have to say I constantly am sort of challenged with this notion of how sales and marketing can work together from a demand gen to a opportunity management kind of perspective. And so often you see there's a disconnect between what happens in those two sort of areas. But your career has sort of taken you through that whole experience from Expedia, working in the e-commerce environment, looking at the challenges of demand gen and opportunity lead generation and how difficult that is. So I think you've obviously one of these individuals in sales enablement. You've got a huge amount of expertise in this area because you've seen so many different aspects of sales enablement. What are your thoughts about professionalizing sales as a function? You probably know that's a subject very close to our heart here at Consalia.
Yeah, I absolutely love that idea. And
Okay.
first of all, I think I'm a salesperson, and I loved. I still see things with a sales mentality. I have that. I have that impatience of achieving objectives, of getting the tangible, the adrenaline that you have when you sign a contract, for
Yes.
example. And so I think that having an experience in sales and dedicating your career to sales really gives you especially when I go back to one of the podcasts where you were talking about when you're in sales, the importance of your value in life.
Mhm.
And if you're a person who likes connecting, who has empathy, and are really living life with authenticity, that's the profession where you want to be, because
Mhm.
all these traits are big traits for a salesperson. It's a lot about connection. It's a lot about helping each other win, and thinking about putting yourself in the other person's shoes and understanding, what can I do for you to make yourself successful? And that's when it's not just about selling, but it's about building the future, the future of a company together.
Yeah, and I think that you said yourself at the beginning of this interview that you fell into sales by accident, and it's probably not what you thought you'd be doing, all these years later. So, with a passion, but in a way, sort of coming into the sales enablement function as well as you have, or thoroughly as you have, it's sort of speaking to those teaching and coaching. I can hear these words coming from you as we're having the interview. But no, it is the most amazing profession to be in for all the reasons that you've just given. And I agree. I think this function of sales enablement is really becoming really important. I'm hearing some different words associated with enablement, which is interesting me, around words like chief anticipation officer, which we're going to do a podcast on with one of the leaders at SAP as well. So, no, I think it has got an enormous future, and I think your knowledge and your experience has been absolutely amazing to have shared with us on this podcast. So I have to say thank you so much, Laura, for taking part. It's been amazing, and I hope we
Thank
can have
you.
you back and share more of your stories at some future episode.
I would be delighted to. Thank you very much, Phil.
Okay, thanks, Laura. That's amazing.